Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you all for coming out on such a beautiful afternoon. It's such an unusual hour for us. Maybe you all like this hour better. Maybe we should change the format. But in any event,
depends on parking,
what? Parking. Don't talk about parking. In any event, I'm sorry we can't give everybody parking. In any event, but welcome to this first session of the Foundation Impact Research Group seminars for this semester. We have a wonderful lineup, and starting with tops this afternoon, Dina Powell. It's a real treat. She is, I think, in the view of most people, really setting a new standard for what she, together with Lloyd Blankfein, I should say,
yes.
together with the CEO of Goldman Sachs, they are setting a new standard for what corporate social responsibility is all about. It's a totally different paradigm. She's going to talk a little bit about that, I think, today, right? Mm-hmm. She's also going to talk a little bit about impact investing today, right? And she'll talk about anything else you want to ask her questions about today. Dina is a really fascinating person with great experience both in the public sector, in the White House, in the Department of State, and now most recently in running Goldman Sachs's corporate engagement. The corporate engagement function at Goldman Sachs includes the foundation, the Goldman Sachs Foundation. It includes what the company does. It includes advising the partners of Goldman Sachs in their own philanthropy. It's a broad-ranging, multi-portfolio function that she serves there. And as far as I don't know where she gets the energy to do all these things. She has two young girls, daughters, and yet she gets it done. And I want to thank her for coming down here and giving us the opportunity of hearing from her personally, and also giving you the chance to ask questions. So in any event, without further ado, it's a real honor to have you here with us again, Dina. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Wow, with an introduction like that, I kind of wish my 14 and 10-year-old girls had heard it. They'd be listening more when I say do your homework and other things. Well, it is such a privilege for me to be here with all of you. And I'm so honored that so many of you are interested in learning more about the work that we do. I will say the work that we do has been guided by and influenced by my most important mentor, Joel Fleischman. And I want to tell you a little quote. He's going to be mad at me, but I was reading a quote the other day, and it really occurred to me that in life, it is so much more important to follow your passion, and even if you're not sure, where that road will lead. And so I'll read you a quote, and maybe you've heard it before, but Franklin Roosevelt: "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is usually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but those who strive to make an impact." And I think of Joel Fleischman when I think of that quote. And I really mean that.
Well, there's certainly sweat. No blood yet.
No blood yet, good. But you know what I mean by that is Joel set out on this extraordinary life path, which has been very diverse and multidimensional. But I think it was he who had this sense that there is an opportunity to build programs that really make an impact in the world. They're not PR, they're not, nice to do, but if you're thoughtful about impact investing, if you're thoughtful about supporting nonprofits and philanthropic endeavors in an academic, metric-oriented way, you can make a difference. And he has taught so many of us that. Maybe I'll just share a little bit about my background. I was just with Professor Peter Feaver and his team talking about national security and background, particularly in the Middle East. I was born in Cairo, Egypt. My family immigrated to the United States when I was a very young girl. I didn't speak English when I moved to Dallas, Texas, which was a huge culture shock. A lot of assimilation between Cairo and Dallas, Texas, I'll tell you that. I was just telling Peter's students, and I really do enjoy sharing this story when I'm in academic settings, but particularly with students. My parents used to tell me, Dina, we left our homeland so that you and your sisters could pursue your dreams. anything you want to be, as long as you're a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. Now, how many of you have heard that? Raise your hand, because I know in every room that I speak to students. And so my parents thought, in Egypt, those are the three professions. And when I ended up serving in government, that just, their brains exploded because they didn't understand what that meant. But I had the privilege of serving our country, working for members of Congress in the House leadership for 5 years. I worked for President Bush for 5 years, running presidential personnel and office in the White House, and then working for my mentor, Condi Rice, as Assistant Secretary of State. And, I share that because we're in this, I don't want to get into politics, but we're in this crazy political season when, we wonder what it's all about. And I really do think there are still parents around the world like mine who believe in something called the American dream. And I always want to, make sure we all remember how important that is. Having done almost 12 years in government, I thought that I would continue doing some role like that, but I was recruited to work at Goldman Sachs in 2007. This obviously is an institution that had many individuals, our leaders, that believed in public service. Hank Paulson, John Whitehead, maybe some of you knew, who really believed that there is this sense that you should both serve in public office opportunities and in nonprofit ways. In fact, at that time, Lloyd, I remember he always tells us the story that when he made partner, the very first question they asked him was, what nonprofit board are you going to get on? Because that's what you do, because we have a responsibility and an opportunity to impact. So they certainly didn't need my help thinking about the kind of values the firm should have in this area. But what they were looking to do was really think about the next 10 years of impact investing or philanthropy. And I would say, and I think Joel would agree with me, that you know how we talk about technology and how it's disrupted everything in real time? Not just 10 years ago, but like 2 years ago there wasn't Snapchat, or it happened so fast. I actually think the greatest disruption in philanthropy has happened in the last 10 years, certainly from a corporate philanthropic standpoint. Gone are the days where companies buy tables at galas, put their names on stadiums, and call it philanthropy. I do think the companies that really care about this have asked themselves, what is our unique set of assets? What do we have that is very differentiating, that we can do something to make a difference in the world? Our set of relationships, our expertise, and our people. What could our people know something about? And that's what we set out to do in 2007. We really believed at the time that economic development was critical. This was way before, actually, the financial crisis. One of our senior economists at the firm, Kathy Matsui, had written a piece called Womenomics. It had looked at labor force participation rates by women in Japan. And it was really a remarkable piece of research that is now the foundation for Prime Minister Abe's domestic policy many years later. But it really showed mathematically the impact that greater labor force participation by women in Japan would have, not only on the Japanese economy, but given the size of the Japanese economy, the impact that would have on global GDP growth. And we were able to say, well, we care about global GDP growth. We're a company whose growth is tied to that. And that was really the beginning of our program called 10,000 Women. We really looked at an opportunity to invest in female entrepreneurs around the world. This was not microfinance, although microfinance had been a transformative model for women at a very low dollar loans. But this was really an investment in the so-called SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises owned by women. In countries as diverse as China, Brazil, Rwanda, Afghanistan, we took a big bet and said, could we work with these female entrepreneurs, and while they were able to grow their businesses and create jobs, would we actually see what we had hoped we'd see, which is that 90% of a woman's income is reinvested in society. And when a woman becomes economically empowered, you see great change. That was our big bet. Of course, at Goldman Sachs, you have to have a very detailed business plan. You present it to the board. You talk about the metrics that you're going to have. It was a significant amount of dollars, $100 million over 5 years, to not only reach that number of women with this program, but to invest in the capacity in each country. So to create entrepreneurship centers that were sustainable long after this initial grant. And what we found was we were all focused on the numbers, right? We are a numerical bunch, and we were focused on that. We underestimated that sometimes when a corporation comes out on an issue, it gets even more attention. And in this case, a white guy named Lloyd Blankfein standing up and saying, I found my greatest investment, women. It really had a huge impact, I think, on the broader movement. Many years we had seen the World Bank and the United Nations talking about the impact of educating girls, economically investing in women, but the private sector hadn't spoken yet and said this is just a path to global growth and economic opportunity. So many years later now, my gosh, it's been 8 or 9. We have
10.
reached 10. Well, that was the initial phase, but we really launched in 2008. And we've seen 10,000 women graduate from the program. We have independently assessed the program. If you know Joel Fleischman, he's a big believer in something called the RCT, making sure that your intervention actually made a difference in a random controlled trial. And we did so and did something companies don't do. We transparently released the results, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Luckily, the good really was meaningful. 80% of the women in this program had increased revenues. 60% had created net new jobs. But the interesting number was that we were worried it was hard to quantify that multiplier effect, the impact that investing in women has that may be more unique, no offense, men. And we found that you could quantify it by how many women were graduating and paying it forward. And in this case, 9 out of 10 graduates of 10,000 women were actually mentoring 8 more women when they graduated on average. And so we were even able to quantify that qualitative nature of the investment. And it's amazing when you measure, when you transparently release results, what happens. We actually got a call from Jim Kim at the World Bank, the president of the World Bank, and he said, one of my central policies at the World Bank for global development is investing in women. I see this as changing the future for global development. I'd like to work with you to scale the program. And so we actually worked with him in an investment, which I'll be happy to describe in more detail, where we actually raised together $600 million to create the first ever female fund that will lend through local banks around the world to 100,000 female entrepreneurs much needed capital in an average loan size of $40,000. So we sort of did what I think is the future, which was really the public and the private coming together. And the way that we think about this at Goldman Sachs is we're just one private sector institution with a unique set, we hope, of opportunities to invest in. But if we could think of ourselves as an innovation lab, where the private sector really should be investing the riskier capital that governments and multilateral institutions usually cannot invest. But if those models prove, based on data, not emotion, that it works, then really government and multilateral are the institutions that can scale these programs. So we were extremely proud, not only to have this partnership with Jim Kim, but last July, President Obama announced when he was in Africa that he would be investing $100 million in this 10,000 Women Fund through OPIC. And so really it was a good example of that public and private.
And is it fair to say, I think, didn't Bridgespan do the original design, the original design for the research? That was really key to everything that Dina has described, because it documented step by step the consequences. Right?
Absolutely. And I know Tom is one of the speakers for you that you all will hear from, another important mentor of mine in my career. But Bridgespan, up until that point, had never worked for a company. They really only worked for nonprofits. As you may know, they redid the business plan for Jeff Canada at the Harlem Children's Zone. They had done extraordinary work. So innocently, I went to see Tom. We had a mutual friend, and I was, humbly saying I'd be so honored, if you would work with us. And he said, no, we don't work with companies. He just shot me down. And I said, what? But we're really serious about this. And so he had to meet Lloyd Blankfein. He had to meet John Rogers. And at the end of those meetings, he said, wow. He said, that line, it's a sizzle, not steak. He said, I think this is steak. I think you all really want to try to make a difference. And so, as Joel said, they set up the initial metrics, because you could have measured a lot of different things. And I think they were really the ones who said, if you don't have a control group, people might say, well, the economy in Brazil was growing anyway. These women didn't need your help. And so that was incredibly helpful. And it was the RCT really was done by the International Center for Research on Women, and then Babson later did. Not a traditional one. Usually an RCT takes about 15,000, I think they told me, data points, but you had 2 groups at the exact same time, those women who'd gone through 10,000 women and those who hadn't, and the data was clarifying.
Good, that's good.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
And that led to, and I'll share very quickly what we did in the United States. Ironically, we tested the model outside the United States, and then when it worked, we said, well, maybe this is something for the U.S. I'll share that briefly with you, and I'll maybe just ask that we show the video of both programs when I'm done with this description. So again, in 2007, we realized that the Goldman Sachs Foundation, which had been started when the firm went public, had understandably invested 95% of every grant, 95% of the grants have been in the United States. We very proudly were seed investors for Teach for America, Donors Choose, Charles Best, and others. But at that time, 51% of the people that worked at Goldman were outside the United States. And we really were asking, is there a global program that we can also invest in? And that was really, 10,000 women. Well, after we saw that empowering entrepreneurs in these countries was making a difference in the communities in which they were working, we realized that the U.S., especially after the financial crisis, had, and we always intended to do something in the U.S., had a very important job creation engine called small business owners. I don't know if you all would know this, but 80% of every job created in the U.S. in the last 10 years has been created by a small business. And yet those business owners often did not have access to capital, did not have access to pragmatic business education. Again, with Tom and the team at Bridgespan, we started looking at how could we kind of tweak 10,000 women and deliver it in the U.S. And so we went out this time and said, let's get some other people that can give us good advice. The co-chairs for the program, along with Lloyd, are Warren Buffett, Mike Bloomberg, and Michael Porter. And they really pushed us. Pretty good group. We're very lucky. They're very, very invested. And I think they felt this calling also, though, to, here we have like a really good answer to job creation in America, and yet this population is not getting the support that it needs. And so we took the model that we tested globally, and we very purposely decided to work through community colleges. And I know you've done some work on this, but these are really treasures in our country. I mean, we love Duke, and we love institutions, four-year institutions, including mine. But when you want to be entrepreneurial and move a program very quickly, and frankly reach immigrant populations that are in communities where community colleges are, we really saw this as an important investment. So 10,000 Small Businesses is the U.S. version of the program. We are now in 25 cities across the country. We have a national program where you can take the full program at Babson College, who developed our curriculum. What's been surprising is that Michael Porter said to us, these are very busy individuals, and this is an intensive program. 4 months, every other Saturday, an intense module, negotiations, access to capital, how you lead your people, what is financial planning. And so he said you should expect a 25% attrition rate because they're running their business, and if they need your help, they're probably busy. And it's really been shocking to us, but we're very proud. We've had a 99% graduation rate. And in fact, Walter Bumfus, who's the head of the Association of Community Colleges and is on our advisory council, has cited 10,000 Small Businesses as the highest graduating program in community colleges in the U.S. And the reason we're proud of that is it must be giving value to these business owners. And in many cases, we see they take the negotiations module on a Saturday and renegotiate all their contracts on Monday. So it's real-time value. The other number that surprised us is that many people said, well, the business owners might compete, like if you have 2 landscapers or 2 web designers. And we were a little bit nervous. In fact, initially we would try to put them in different cohorts. Crazily enough, the statistic that we're equally proud of is 80% of the graduates of the program do business together. So they feel an affinity or a closeness and give each other business. So it's actually created a marketplace. So we're extremely proud, and I can share with you, in fact, get your advice. We scaled 10,000 women, and Joel's going to think I'm making this up. I came 3 years ago. I usually come every year and have the privilege of doing this seminar. And students were saying, well, how are you going to scale 10,000 women? And I said, well, what do you think? And remember they said, well, if you're going to really scale it meaningfully, you've got to think about public sector investment. And so today I'm going to pose the question, how do we scale 10,000 small businesses? And I'd love your thoughts. But maybe we can show the video very quickly of both programs.
Amazing. You might say a word about the ingredients of the program. I think that, I don't want to say it for you, but it's the educational institutions you connect them with. It's the funds that you make available to help them borrow more money. Just amplify what the components of it are.
Sure. Well, we had studied, what are the elements that really empower an entrepreneur. These programs are not for startups. I mean, these are individuals who've already shown the passion, the drive, the hard work. So in both programs, you have to have been operating a business for 2 years, have at least 4 employees, and not because we don't want to help startups, you just have to pick a focus area. And we found that the real opportunity for job creation was helping that size business reach its potential after these business owners have plateaued in many ways. And so the 3 ingredients are really pragmatic business education, and I stress pragmatic, not theoretical. This is really, if you're not the chef anymore, Io, you're the CEO. You're not the general contractor anymore, Carla, you're the CEO. And how do you become the CEO? And think about it in terms of a growth business plan. So you can't graduate from these programs without completing a growth business plan that, by the way, is reviewed by a Goldman Sachs banker. Joel a couple of years ago said to me, "What's been the greatest failure?" And I said, challenge. And I said, we just really underestimated how many people would want to be coaches and mentors. So we have waiting lists, and then people get grumpy, and then I get yelled at. So, but it's a nice problem to have that we have so many people, both in the global program and in the U.S. program, that are eager to sit down and actually review a business plan with a business owner and ask all the tough questions. So pragmatic business education is central. The second is, of course, financing, growth and working capital, which we provide now in both programs in the descriptions I gave earlier. What's interesting, though, is how many people apply to the program for the capital. Oh, okay, good, I can get some capital. And then when they go through it, they realize, oh, I don't actually need capital. I need to shut down that restaurant and turn it into a catering business, or I need to get a better board, or I need to get more government contracts. And so that's been a really good lesson for all of us, that oftentimes helping a business owner realize it's not capital they need is a value in of itself. And then that business advising and coaching. I mean, there's a reason why it's not, easy to scale these programs, because if it was just a one-day workshop, you wouldn't see these results. It is an intense program that we're getting better at scaling all the time, but you do have to have, we believe, all 3 ingredients. You might, ask, well, why not online learning? We actually do now think much more and provide virtual learning in a lot of the modules, but the truth is we found that in-person, actual, not just from the teachers and professors, but the connectivity of the business owners, so you don't feel like you're an island all by yourself. You've got fellow business owners with the same challenges, even if the business is a totally different business. So, that's just a reality, but, we continue to work to scale it.
And you also, analogous to the community colleges that you've got working with 10,000 small businesses, you had universities,
yes,
right, in the other countries.
And we believed, people often ask a variance of this question, well, what did the men in Afghanistan and Egypt think, about this program? And how did you deal with cultural issues? We never went to a country that uninvited, that first and foremost. We are not a government, we are a private institution, and, we had that as certainly a boundary. But we never went in and said, oh, hi, we're here to help. We found the most respected local academic institutions and nonprofits that were already established and respected, and worked with them. Now we pushed them a little bit. So I'll give you 2 great examples of that. Tsinghua University, which has been an extraordinary partner for us in Beijing, it's really our central partner in China, has done a great job educating generations of leaders, but candidly elites. I mean, that's tends to be. So when we explained to them, nope, there's actually a household income level, there's a different kind of woman that we're looking for, many from Western China, until we'd opened campuses in Western China for the program. And they said, oh no, we're not sure those women would be successful here. And a few years in, I mean, I will never forget being in Beijing with a woman whose father was sobbing in the background, never imagining he would set foot at Tsinghua University, much less watching his daughter graduate from a program there. And, we were so humbled by the fact that the president of Tsinghua at the time said, together we are learning that we are both institutions that have a responsibility in our societies. And so it was just humbling beyond measure. And we saw that at the American University in Cairo, where my mother graduated from, and I'm on the board of now. They told us we don't teach programs in Arabic, they all have to be English. And we said, well, that'd be a lot of women that can't get into this program in Cairo, Egypt. And so we're the only program where there's an exception. Well, they teach it in Arabic. So again, I don't want to sound bossy, or we told them, I mean, it was really a collective partnership with each of these institutions to try hard to make sure we were reaching the right segment.
All right. What are you going to do for an encore? I mean, you're going to scale, you've already scaled 10,000 women to 100,000 women, right? And what's the scaling possibility for 10,000 small businesses?
Well, I may turn it over to all of you. There are a number of areas where we could go. Very purposely with 10,000 women, we didn't want to do one more cohort of 10,000. That we really wanted to answer another white space, and that's why we went to capital. We had, again, always research is a very good foundational motivator. We had done research called Giving Credit Where Credit is Due, which could actually quantify the amount of capital that women entrepreneurs around the world are seeking, and that if that gap were met, per capita income would actually increase by 14% in the emerging economies. So there was a $300 billion capital gap, meaning that's how much women would love to borrow right now for working and growth capital. And if you could meet that, in a country like Brazil, it was 27%. So if the female entrepreneurs in that country could get capital, that's the per capita income you would see rise. So we purposely said, we've got little momentum here. Let's do something even bigger than, not that, continuing the cohort wasn't important to us. And so I think with 10,000 small businesses, there's a little bit of that. We're asking what is going to happen. Both candidates, by the way, have put out, particularly Secretary Clinton has put out a very specific agenda for small businesses. Interestingly, training is central to her recommendation. I think there is a huge opportunity over the next 5 years, 10 years, to really push a new generation of business owners in our country to be driving the growth that we need, whether it's around infrastructure, whether it's around, there might be bigger spaces. So we're thinking now about how we could dramatically scale.